Hey, it's Denise. Today we are reading Solangelo, part 4 technically, because part 3 wasn't about Solangelo in the fanfic. It wasn't about Solangelo, it was about Apollo and another Greek god. I'm not saying the name of the Greek god because I don't know a lot about the story, because I was about to read it, but then I realized it wasn't Solangelo, it was about Apollo and a different god. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the god, so I'm going to leave it at that. But if you would like to read about it, as always, the link will be in the description. So you could just go to the third part and you can read that if you would like. But enough babbling, let's go. Let's get started. Prompt. Soulmate OU. Mortal AU. The classic overused but fun name on the arm. Will doesn't have a name on his arm and wants to get it tattooed on. Third person point of view. Will marched determinedly towards the local tattoo shop, in only a sweater despite the cold winter air blowing around him. It was late Christmas Eve, cold, and most places were closed, but the blonde didn't care. He'd just run out of his parents' house, fed up with his parents asking when he was going to try and find his soulmate. Nobody but his parents and his brother knew he didn't have a name. It was sad to think that he wasn't going to find somebody who loved him. Yes, people could fall in love with people who aren't their soulmate, but it was rare. At 22 years of age, Will gave up on ever finding someone. He hated the sting of jealousy when he saw people with their soulmate. His parents were soulmates. His brother had found his soulmate along with his friends, and he was there with no name, destined to be alone, to be unloved, to be discarded like a piece of trash. His eyes stung with tears. He pushed them back and opened the door of the shop. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming for a tattoo shop. There was bright wallpaper on one wall, and the rest of the walls lined with white shiplap. Thousands of drawings covered the walls. A counter at the back against the wallpapered wall. There were chairs with tattooing equipment and benches to sit on. It was decorated for Christmas, and there was a table with food. Will looked around and noticed a young man, about his age. He was playing a game on his phone, with headphones sitting in a chair. His feet propped up on the desk. He was bopping his head to the beat of the music. Will tilted his head. The guy was gorgeous. He had dark brown hair that almost looked black. Pulled a small ponytail in the back of his head, equally as dark eyes fixed on the screen, pale skin and plump pink lips. Will almost lost his breath right then and there. He walked towards the counter and cleared his throat. The brunette didn't budge. The blonde cleared his throat once more. Still, no response. He half leaned over the counter and waved his tan hand in front of the phone. The man finally noticed, jumping from his seat, pulling the earbuds from his ears. "Sorry, I got caught up in the game," he apologized. "It's fine," Will said, pulling the sleeve of his sweater down, hiding his bare left wrist. Where people usually had their soulmate's name. "How can I help you?" "I'm not a tattoo artist, but Hazel, the owner, and the artist is out right now. She'll be back in a bit. She's getting some Christmas supplies." I just want a tattoo, Will said. You spend Christmas here? He added. The man nodded. He scratched the back of his neck, making his leather jacket show his wrist. Will's heart dropped. Though he didn't know why he cared, there was a name. Hazel Levisque. Hazel, my friend. Hazel, my friend. Frank and I spent Christmas here every year. We don't have anybody else but each other, so what's the difference to celebrate at home or here? Oh, cool, the blonde breathed, pulling even more on his sweater sleeves. What are you doing here alone on Christmas Eve? What are you doing here all alone on Christmas Eve? Well, my, well, my family, they're great, but I can't stand them, Will said, averting the brunette's curious gaze. Oh, Will and the man both stood awkwardly, looking away from each other. I'm Nico, by the way, the man said. At the same time, Will announced, I'm Will. The two men looked at each other before laughing. Nico had a beautiful laugh. It made Will happy, and his heart raced. He spotted the name Hazel LeCueve again on his arm, and his throat closed up. Why did the fact that this man had just met how why did the fact that this man he had just met had a soulmate make him so sad? I couldn't help but notice the name on your wrist. How long have you and Hazel been together? Will asked. Hugo laughed and looked at his wrist. He spoke. Hazel and I aren't together. She's married to Frank, the co-owner. Will must have looked confused, beyond reason, because Nico laughed again. Frank's soulmate died at birth. He traced her down and found Hazel. He traced her down and found out. Hazel and I have known each other since we were kids. We call each other our siblings. Being soulmates doesn't mean being in love. It means having a connection. So strong nothing can break it. Frank never met his soulmate, but it still makes him sad when he thinks about her. Anyway, I'm gay, so if she did want me in that way, I couldn't possibly reciprocate her feelings. Will let out a breath. He didn't know he was holding. Oh, he simply said, what about you? Have you found your soulmate? The blonde looked down at his wrists, at his sweater sleeves, and pulled them again, creating sweater paws. Oh my god, so many mistakes. I'm so sorry. He normally just said he didn't find his soulmate yet, but for some reason he felt like he could trust Nico. I don't have one. I was born to be in love my whole life, he mumbled, looking at his feet. He lifted his arm, letting his sleeve fall down, showing his bare wrist. Oh, that explains it, Nico said. Will looked up and raised an eyebrow. Explains what? Why you're here. You said you couldn't stand your family, so I take it they don't know about your lack of soulmate? About your lack of a soulmate, and are pressuring you to find your soulmate? By the way, you hold your by the way, you hold yourself and how you cover your wrist. I can tell you're insecure, but the whole no soulmate situation I can tell you're insecure about the whole no soulmate situation. So you're here to get a random name tattooed on your wrist, Nico told him. Will opened his mouth and closed it incredulously. Incredulous. How? He simply said. The brunette laughed. I'm good at reading people, he smiled. Will smiled softly back, blushing slightly. Will? Will? Mm-hmm. Can I give you a piece of advice? The blonde nodded. I don't get some rando's name as a tattoo. One day you'll find someone who will love you as much as as you love her, and you'll have this person's name on your wrist, just there. I don't think she'd like that. Maybe when you're sure you want to spend the rest of your life with her, get a tattoo of her name, Nico said. Him, Will said, tugging on his sleeve, out of habit. Pardon? As much as I love him, I'm also gay. Nico formed an O with his mouth, a pink tint creeping up on his neck. Will thought he imagined it until the brunette spoke up. Also, Will? Yeah. Not having a soulmate doesn't mean being unloved. Soulmates are just soulmates are just an unbreakable bond between two people. I don't Hazel and I oh my goodness. This sentence doesn't make sense. I'm so sorry. I don't like Hazel in that way. I don't like Hazel in that way, but she's my soulmate. Soulmates are an invention of society. They don't mean romantic love. They mean unconditional love between those two people. Will hummed. I guess so. I guess it's okay if I guess it's okay if I can give you my number, Nico asked, scratching the back of his neck. Will's eyes widened. Never in his 22 years of existence had somebody given him their number. Yeah, sure, he breathed out. Nico smiled and scribbled a series of numbers on a piece of paper and handed it to Will. The blonde looked at it, making sure it was real, making sure this wasn't just a dream. I take it not many people give you their number? Will shook his head, running a hand through his messy locks, not noticing his bare left wrist was out in the open. Nico smiled, to which the blonde gladly responded. I should head home, he finally said. The pale boy nodded, looking mildly disappointed. The blonde turned around and walked to the door. Before he could reach it, a couple holding hands opened the door. Hey, oh, hello, a peppy young woman in her early 20s said. She had dark skin and light brown hair. She was holding the hand of a tall man with black hair. Both of them had a tattoo under their left collarbone, above their heart. The man saying Hazel, and the woman was Frank. Hi, Will simply said. Did you want a tattoo? Sorry I wasn't here. My husband and I don't get much clientele on Christmas, she said. I hope my brother didn't bother you, she added, looking over at Nico. Will let out a breathy laugh. No, he was quite nice, he said, looking over his shoulder at the brunette blushing. Nico smiled back. Will looked back at the couple. An understanding look was exchanged between who the blonde supposed were Hazel and Frank. Oh, I see what's going on here, Hazel giggled. Frank smiled. I'm gonna head home now, Will said, looking one final time at Nico. He turned around and pushed the door open. Wait! Will, stop! Do you want to stay? I know you don't really like your family, Nico said. The blonde turned around and smiled, his blue eyes meeting Nico's brown eyes. Sure. Hazel, what if he doesn't like my gift? The blonde asked, anxiety-driven. Calm down, Will. Calm down, Will. Well, it's gonna ruin the tattoo. Anyway, it's your 1-year anniversary. He'll love it. I'm sure of it. Now stop moving, the woman said. Will huffed and stopped moving. He and Nico had met a year and a half ago. It had taken 6 months for them to finally start dating. It was only their first anniversary. And Will was sure he was going to marry the brown-haired man someday. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I worried too much. We know, both Frank and Hazel said. Frank was sitting at the counter, working on his computer, while Hazel was giving Will his first tattoo. After a few minutes, Hazel pulled back from Will and said, "It's done. Good luck tonight." Will thanked her, looking awed at his tattoo. "Thank you so much, Hazel," he repeated. "It's no problem. Now go," the dark-skinned woman said, smiling. Will pushed the door open after having paid Hazel. It's free, Will." "Hazel, let me pay." And headed to the tiny apartment he and Nico shared. The warm air made Will happy. He was often described by people as a sunny person. Starting the habit, Nico had called him Sunshine. He climbed the 4 flights of stairs to his small studio. He unlocked the door to find his boyfriend sitting on the kitchen counter, flipping through pages of a book. The brunette looked up and smiled brightly. "Where were you?" I thought we were spending the whole day together," Nico said, jumping off the counter and setting the book down on the table. He walked over to the blonde, pecking his lips. I just had to make a last minute errand run," Will said, tugging on his sweater sleeve, shielding the view of his wrist. He wrapped his arms around Nico's slim waist, holding him close. "I love you," he mumbled into the dark brown locks. Nico laughed, burying his face into Will's chest. "I love you too, Sunshine." They stood there in silence, holding each other. "Should we start making dinner?" Will asked, checking the time. Nico nodded, but didn't move. "Neeks, the kitchen's over there." The Italian groaned and finally broke away from the blonde. Their attempt at making homemade pizza ended up with Will drenched in tomato sauce and cheese, and Nico having pizza dough in his hair. They cleaned up, taking a shower. Will ordered pizza while Nico turned Netflix on, putting on How I Met Your Mother. Will joined him on the couch, wrapping his arms tightly around Nico, making sure his wrists weren't visible. Nico climbed into the blonde's lap, watching Barney make Canadian jokes at Robin. The pizza arrived after 2 episodes. "Sunshine, can we eat in front of the TV?" Nico whined, laying on the couch. Will left from the kitchen, grabbing 2 cans of Pepsi. "If you want to," he said. Nico let out a weak yay, making Will laugh harder. They began watching Friends and How I Met Your Mother while eating pizza until Nico perked up. "Will?" "Yeah, darling?" "I kind of have a gift for you," the brunette said. Will smiled. "You didn't have to get me anything." Will smiled back and not killed and kissed. Well, Nico smiled back and kissed Will. He got up. "I wanted to," he said, walking towards their shared bedroom. After the brunette was out of view, Will glanced nervously at his left wrist. What if Nico doesn't like his gift? What if he thought Will was rushing things? Before anxiety could take over, Will sensed Nico come back with a CD. "I know it's not much, but I made it myself," he mumbled, handing Will the CD. The blonde took it and started looking at the yellow cover. He didn't know whether he should cry. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh. The CD was a collection of songs. "Here Comes the Sun," "You Are My Sunshine," and "Walking on Sunshine," sung by Nico himself. All songs revolved around the sun. Will looked up at his boyfriend and smiled brightly, pulling the younger man into his arms. "I love it. Thank you so much." Nico smiled and kissed Will, cupping his cheeks. "You couldn't You couldn't really call it a kiss. The two were smiling so much it was impossible for them to kiss properly. Will adjusted his position so Nico's back was against his chest. His arms looping around Nico's shoulders. The blonde kissed the top of Nico's head. I have a gift for you too, darling, Will said, his heart racing. Nico awed. You didn't have to, sunshine. I wanted to, Will said, nervously, playing with his sleeves. I'm so sorry about that. Something happened, so I stopped the recording, but I am going to continue with the recording now. I will be rereading a few things, so I'm sorry about that, but yeah, let's continue. You didn't have to, sunshine. I wanted to, Will said nervously, playing with his sleeves. His heart was beating so fast, he was sure Nico could feel it. Sure enough, Nico asked, Why are you so nervous? Your gift, well, it's kinda risky, Will said, squeezing Nico closer. If it's lingerie, I really don't mind, Will, Nico teased. Will laughed and blushed. It's not lingerie. What is it then? The brunette asked. Will took a deep breath. He pulled up his sleeve. He said, pull up my left sleeve, he said, turning his hand so his palm faced the ceiling. Nico gasped, knowing already what it was. He slowly pulled it up and revealed a name written in black ink on Will's wrist. Nico D'Angelo. Sunshine, Nico said, sounding choked up. He turned around, his eyes tearing, and straddled Will. His eyes teary and straddled Will. The blonde looked worried. Do you like it? I shouldn't have done that. It's probably rushing. If it is, I'm so sorry. Will was cut off by Nico planting his lips on his. I love it. I love you too. I love it. I love you so much, William Salas. Nico whispered against his lips. Will smiled and said, I love you too, Nico D'Angelo. Will had held Nico closer as they laid in their bed, admiring the silver band encrusted with a gem. The exact copy of one of Nico's. The exact copy. Oh my god. It says it EXCEPT. Accept. The accept copy. I think they meant exact. The exact copy of the one on Nico's finger. How are you doing, Mr. Salas? Will said, kissing his new husband's head. It was Christmas Eve, 4 years after their first encounter. The day of their wedding. Happier than I've ever been, sunshine. The brunette answered, snuggling closer to the older man's chest. Will smiled. Me too, darling. Me too. They held each other in silence, the only sound coming from their breaths and their heart beating. Nico kissed the ring on Will's tanned finger. Will, he said. Will hummed, burying his face in his husband's brown locks. Can I show you something? The blonde nodded, sitting up. Nico took a deep breath and said, Remember our first anniversary? How could I not? Nico traced the tattoo on Will's wrist. When you tattooed my name on your wrist, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. I got this a few days ago. I tried to conceal it from you. It's obviously worked, but it was hard. Will tilted his head like a confused puppy. Nico tugged at the bottom of his shirt. Will tugged at the bottom of his shirt, pulling it over his head. Will gasped and touched the place right above Nico's heart. I was inspired by Hazel and Frank. I was inspired by Hazel and Frank, Will. When we met on Christmas Eve, something happened. I never asked for someone's number that fast after your meeting, but you were different. You had the most gorgeous eyes I'd ever seen, and I just wanted to kiss the whole time you were talking to me. When you said you were destined to be unloved, I'd made my mission to make you feel loved. Those past 4 years were the best of my life. I love you with all my heart, Will Solace. No name on on the wrist that can there's no name on my wrist that can change that. I choose you as my soulmate, and this tattoo symbolizes that. Will's eyes filled with tears and he kissed Nico. A hand on Nico's bare chest, over his new tattoo. Above Nico's heart, right under his collarbone, was the name Will Solace in Nico's cursive handwriting. Well, that is the end of part 3/4 of Solangelo one-shots. Part 2 will be posted in a couple hours. Or part 2, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to call it part 4. But it'll be posted in a couple hours. And until then, I will see you guys next time. I love you guys. Bye.